in the Brush Lounge, and I am Monique Walker. My co-host here is Evie Barron Hernandez, and our guest again, and I don't know, maybe Gwen, you are finding a home in the lounge or something, because you sure feel like family.
Thanks.
Gwen Brehm is back with us today. We are still moving toward this psychotherapy journey of understanding ourselves and just unraveling some of the some of our thoughts, some of our feelings, some of our emotions, and trying to find a path to us being healthy, whole, and dynamic women. Am I right?
Sure.
So, Evie, you want to share anything before we get started?
No, I'm just excited to be doing this with you two and to have Gwen as our guest today.
Yeah, I am truly excited.
Yeah.
Gwen has, oh my God, started on this journey with us. We opened up about trauma. We've talked about suicide. If you're watching the podcast at all, follow us there. The Brush podcast, iTunes, Google, Spotify, and in the Brush Lounge. She has been opening up about such amazing journeys through helping us to understand these psychological things that are happening with us. Today, the tables are turning a bit, and we are talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, or short for CBT.
Right.
CBT. Now, this is a whole one of those new terms that, you know, when you talk about traditional counseling, you hear just, you know, therapy, counseling, what else? Seeing a psychiatrist and all of these kinds of things. Gwen, tell us, what's the difference between traditional psychiatry, traditional treatment, and this new term, CBT?
Not sure I can do that in 30 minutes, but I'll do my best. Okay, so traditional psychiatry, you know, years ago, psychiatry included therapy and medications.
Sure.
And in some parts of the United States, they still do it that way. As a matter of fact, I have a friend who is a psychiatrist in Galveston, and she still does therapy as well as prescribed medications. But a psychiatrist is a medical doctor who's going through medical school, going through residency, and has done a special residency and training in psychiatry and psychological studies. I am a therapist, and I have done training in psychological studies and doing therapy, but don't have a medical degree. So there's a difference between that. So mostly, especially in the Houston area, you're going to see psychiatrists for medication only. They might have a few suggestions as to changing things up for yourself, lifestyle, thought processes, various things like that. Join a group, get support, use network and resources. But most of them will just give medication. As far as CBT, or cognitive behavior therapy, is concerned, it's actually been around a long time. I think it sounds new because the general public didn't usually talk about it.
Yeah.
So like right now, people will call my office and say, "Do you do CBT?"
They Googled
like,
it.
Okay, do you know what that is? You know, yes, I do it. So that was the primary thing that I studied when I was in graduate school about 40 years ago, long time ago. And but back then it was called rational emotive therapy. Albert Ellis started rational emotive therapy. He based it on some earlier studies and theories, and just slowly started changing things up a little bit. And over time it has turned into cognitive behavior therapy. Aaron Beck, probably the bigger proponent of it here in the United States. It's taken some changes. It has morphed from time to time with various people influencing it. But the bottom line is this, is that we have the ability to change our thoughts. We have the ability to change our behaviors, which in turn impact how we feel.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of my favorite statements, not even by a CBT person, is it's easier to act yourself into a new way of feeling than to feel yourself into a new way of acting.
Wow, say that again.
It is easier to
to-
act yourself into a new way of feeling, such as changing your behavior so that you feel differently,
Mhm.
than it is to feel yourself into a new way of acting. And the example that I give a lot of times is cleaning house. Who wakes up in the morning and says, yeah, I feel like cleaning house? I mean, there are probably a small percentage of people who do, but more often we will get into the action of doing it, and then we start feeling better and better about it. Okay, so that's a very elementary example.
So if you try to feel your way into wanting to clean, you probably won't do it.
Right.
Okay. But if
So
you-
how would you, give me an example of how you would try to feel your way into cleaning? Was that an example that you just gave us?
Yeah, like the example of how to feel yourself into is sitting around waiting for motivation.
Okay,
You know, waiting for the feeling to change.
okay.
Okay, but if you just make a decision, I'm going to do this, and we can talk a whole lot about, I mean, we can use this example all the way through if you want to, but if you make the decision that this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to start here, and I'm going to jump in there and do it. And then as time goes by, the momentum of you working upon what you've accomplished so far starts creating a better feeling inside of you. And so you're more likely to keep going and
But the-
build some more
But the
motivation.
feeling doesn't make me get there.
Correct.
The feeling doesn't help me
Correct.
get there.
Now the feeling does if we're going to the spa, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have no trouble getting motivated to go to the spa.
Mhm.
I'm feeling like a massage today.
Yeah.
You know, but for most of us, our feelings are, we call them fickle. You know, one minute you can feel this way, the next minute you can feel a different way, and it can go back and forth. And you've seen that where, let me back up. The example that I give in how your feelings can change from your thoughts, my favorite example is you might be driving down the road, listening to the radio, and you're kind of having a blah day. You know, it's just like, okay, I'm on my way to work, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly the radio announcer says, Gwen Brehm, you have won our $10,000 giveaway for today. And what happens? Your feelings change,
Yeah.
right? Tremendous excitement. You're thrilled to death.
Yeah.
And it's because of your thoughts. Just like a $10,000 giveaway is pretty cool. But if you're on your way to work and somebody bumps into you in your car, your blah day becomes a worse day because you're thinking, great, now I have one more thing I need to take care of. So that's a basis of a lot of what CBT is about, is changing your thought patterns.
You got something?
So I was reading a book the other day, and the doctor was talking about how what he does is to get ready to work out every day. What he does is he actually puts on his workout clothes, and that will prompt him to actually work out. He actually feels like working out more after he actually puts on his workout clothes.
Right, right.
Is that a good example of
Yeah,
it?
that's a great example, and just moving yourself in the direction of whatever your goal is. So I had that same experience this morning.
Mhm.
I got up, it's 44 degrees outside. I
Yeah.
work out outside
I
with
do
a
too.
group,
Yep, I do
and
too.
I'm like, this
Yep.
isn't happening.
Right? I do
And
the same thing.
I'm laying in bed going,
11 o'clock
okay,
in the
so
morning.
I sit up, I put my shoes on, I get dressed, and even almost out the door, I'm still arguing with myself.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, and so a coaching program that I'm a part of uses the mantra, obstacles make me stronger. It's part of the Spartan program. And I'm sitting there going, obstacles make me stronger. Obstacles make me stronger. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to work out. I've got gloves and a hat and a big old jacket on. And just as I'm about to leave, I get a notification on my phone that our workout has been moved into the gym, and I was like,
Yes!
so, you know, I was ready to go at that point because I'm like,
I wasn't.
I'm jealous.
So listening to this, it sounds like, and people say this all the time, if you're guided by your feelings, your feelings could potentially guide you wrong or could mislead you. So then value has to be placed somewhere in your emotions, in your cognitive thinking, in your brain, where you're processing how you're going to do your day or whatever it is you're going to do, in order for that to rise above what you are feeling. Because if you think about people like Serena Williams and Simone Biles and all of these great people who propel past the norm to these great achievements, they probably don't feel that same way about these very things. So there's a lot of focus, there's a lot of resilience in that kind of thinking in order to get them to. They don't roll over bed and experience that like we do.
But they
There's
do.
a goal in mind.
No, they do. They do. And
Okay.
I think that's what I think there's a misperception that these people never have to face those mind challenges.
I believe they do,
And
but
they do.
they get out
They've
quicker.
trained themselves to
Yeah.
get out quicker. But I think that the struggle is that we will have a superficial emotion, you know, and those are the ones that are fickle, you know, that go back and forth. But then we usually also have a secondary emotion behind that, which is driving that emotion. And then some deep gut level feelings.
Yeah.
Okay, so for instance, a great example is in your relationships. Let's say, Evie, that your husband really angered you because he didn't do something you asked him to do that was pretty important to do. So that impacts that first thought right there, is that superficial feeling. I'm frustrated and angry because he didn't pick up the dry cleaning and I really need that outfit, okay? The secondary feeling might be, but I can usually trust him on other things, so it's no big deal. Or some people have the opposite experiences. He never does the things that are important to me. So that creates that feeling of mistrust and instability in the relationship. But the bottom, what really is the triggers when it gets down deep, even if you're frustrated because your husband didn't pick up the dry cleaning, you have a strong gut feeling that this is a good person and you want to stay married to them. You know, you're not going to divorce them because they didn't pick up the dry cleaning. Probably aren't even going to divorce them because they do that often. But it gets down to that gut level, and it's those gut feelings that we can usually trust really well. Okay.
So it's that. So when we're making a decision, it still comes back to how valuable or how important that thing is to you. Okay.
Yeah.
So then when trauma happens and there's a need for CBT, then where has what has gone wrong? I felt like when I needed cognition support after a mini stroke, there were some things that just didn't work for me anymore. They were not the same, and I needed to help to get those things back in perspective. I didn't know how to do it myself. I didn't even know what it was in order to get treatment. But belief and deep belief and deep knowing gets shattered some kind of way, or gets off, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so if a sudden abrupt change happens in a person's life, you know what I'm saying? Then those layers that you're talking about, they become identity, or they get murky.
They get confused and mixed up.
And so then is that the purpose of CBT, or talk to us about what can cause a person to need CBT therapy?
CBT is very effective for a lot of things. Really works well with depression, really works well with anxiety. I probably use it more for anxiety than I do anything. I think it falls a little short in some ways with trauma, because they don't, in my opinion, the whole theory of CBT doesn't get down to the physical sensations and the way the body responds to trauma, because it stays so much in the mind. Okay. It is a cognitive therapy. It's one of the cognitive therapies, so there's not a lot of approach on what's happening on a very physical, sensual level for people. So generally when someone comes into my office or has called and said, do you do CBT? Someone has told them CBT would be useful to you for depression, for anxiety, for insecurities, for whatever they may be experiencing in that time. And so it is, because it challenges your thought processes. So one of my favorite experiences, or favorite examples, I guess, is someone coming in and said, nobody loves me.
So then
Okay.
now belief and deep knowing has to be reset.
Exactly. And so it's hard to say, it's hard to go from nobody loves me to I have quite a few people in my life who love me. So we work towards finding evidence to support that. Maybe that, first of all, that belief might not be true. Like there might be somebody in your life who loves you. Like your mom, or something like that. And then we work towards finding evidence to support the different various levels of way people relate to them and love them and care about them, and then start helping them to find evidence to support that there are people in their life that loves them. And it may be the same cashier at the grocery store who talks to them every day, may not love them like their mom, but loves them in a way as I care about you, and when you don't come in, I miss you. So just really challenging those thought processes and helping them get away from a lot of rigid black and white thinking that oftentimes contributes to depression and anxiety and insecurities, different things. Does that make sense?
So tell me how CBT might work to help marriages.
Well, a lot of it, again, is interpreting what's going on. So making a lot of assumptions. And CBT helps couples question their assumptions. Okay? Like the other day, I walked into the living room and I asked my husband a question. Very simple question. I just needed information. And he immediately goes, I didn't do anything right. And I'm like, I just asked a question. I don't even remember what it was about, but I remember his reaction. He's like, I didn't do anything right. I tried so hard and I didn't do it right. And I asked him if he had called something and gotten things worked out. And anyway, it was his assumption about what I was saying. Okay, so in CBT we would say, check your assumption and do it through verbally communicating with this person. So if he had stopped and said, Gwen, the way you're saying that is sounding this way to me. I'm wondering if you're thinking that I made something wrong or did something wrong, or, and challenged his own thought. I would have said, no, I just wanted to know, did you get it done? Did you do it? Did you not do it? Yes or no? And I could have helped him challenge that thought that was coming up inside of him, that he didn't do it up to my standards or whatever was coming up inside of his head. Is there probably the biggest problem in relationships, son, daughter, mother, child, husband, wife, anything like that, is communication. And we interpret and assign interpretations and assumptions to a lot of what is said.
And we move away from the facts.
And if we would keep it simple, so teaching people how to keep it simple, teaching people how to communicate more clearly, teaching people to really identify and address their own assumptions. Is this logical? Did your husband wake up that morning trying to make your life miserable? He woke up and said, gee, how can I make Gwen as miserable as possible today? Really evaluating and checking in with the thought processes that are coming up in our heads.
And those are conversations that are not being had. Those are conversations that are going on
inside our head and nobody knows about it.
But that's
Right.
where all of the activity all of our responses and reactions are to that, but that's not what's coming
Right,
out.
right. So here's an example that I often use is imagine yourself as living in a house with a white picket fence around you,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And you are the one who controls the gate to the white picket fence. So everything that you think, everything that you feel, and all of your behaviors are your responsibility inside that fence.
Yeah.
Same thing for the person across the street. They have their thoughts, their feelings, their behaviors, and it's inside their fence. The relationship happens when we open our gates and we go out into the street. Okay? So I'm bringing all of my thoughts, my feelings, and my behaviors into the street, meeting them with their thoughts, feelings, behaviors into the street.
And the picket fence.
And then that's where you go. So boundaries can be set up really well by, I'm staying in my fence, I'm not even going to get into that arena with you while you're bringing all that stuff. But more often than not, we don't stay in our boundaries. We get right into the arena when it's not healthy, or we bring so much of our own stuff and they're bringing their stuff, and what's happening in the street is not a meet and greet.
Yeah.
It's a lot of assumptions and bringing baggage, as we use that term a lot, into that particular relationship. And so I think helping ourselves to understand, this is my thought, my feeling, you didn't do anything that caused that. I'm taking responsibility for this is how I feel when you do this thing or say this thing. Okay, does that make sense?
It does make sense. So basically CBT is a skills over pills approach to therapy, to relationships, depression, anxiety, and all these types of things.
Right, and I'm not even sure I would go so far as to say skills over pills, because sometimes medication is really needed, and almost all things like depression, anxiety, etc. need a combination of medication and psychotherapy. However, if people are getting good psychotherapy and actually following through and trying to make changes, oftentimes they don't need as much medication or any at all, depending on their situation.
So it's psychotherapy and behavioral therapy. So
behavior therapy falls under psychotherapy. So psychotherapy really talks about thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, no matter what. It's global. There's very different types of psychotherapy that goes on, depending on the therapist and what their skills are. So I usually tell people I'm a skills-based therapist.
Yeah.
It's easier to say that because I like to give people skills and I like to give them tools. I'm not so much of a chit-chat person, hold your hand and just nod. It's not me, as you can tell. I'm very talkative. So, but CBT is very much based on skills. We set up behavioral experiences to help people learn that they're going to be okay and their anxiety is not helpful to them. An example I often give clients is, I used to be terribly afraid of snakes, which is no big deal.
Me too.
My husband has a phobia.
Me too.
Yeah, so I did too, and I tell people it probably started when I was out in the field against my mother's wishes, and a snake curled up around my leg, scared the bejeebers out of me. Of course, I was already doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing, and then to have that happen, I go running into the house. Of course, mother had the attitude, well, I told you to stay out of that field, wasn't very nurturing about that experience.
That contributed to
the phobia. But of all things, my first two children are boys, and of course they want to go to the zoo and they want to go to the herpetarium where they can see the snakes, and then they want to touch them and all of this, and I'm just like, well, I cannot stand outside while my children are in this building, right? So I had to get my big girl panties on but exposing myself, I know that's not the best term, but that's what we use, exposure therapy, exposing myself to that anxiety producing situation, cause my anxiety to go off, cause that amygdala to fire off and scare the bejeebers out of me, But over time, doing it over and over and over again, my mind realized I was going to be okay. I'm not going to be bit by a snake. The snake is not going to wrap its body around my neck and choke me when it's only this long. You know, I'm going to be fine. And I even got to the point that I could hold the snake and pet it. I'm not sure that's so. You know, over time I got to where I could handle snake. I don't enjoy it, but I'm not having an anxiety response. And we use exposure response prevention therapy for a lot of things. People who are afraid of germs, people who are afraid of dirt, and then we use it also for people who have other OCD type symptoms, like checking the doors every night before they go to bed multiple times, checking to make sure all the appliances are off multiple times before they leave to work, or other types of symptoms that show up. So we use, that's a part of CBT as well.
So, like Evie was saying, how do you help with that in a relationship, in a marriage? And you with the snake, do you lean into the thing that you are pessimistic about? Is leaning into it, becoming more aware of the of how that particular thing works? Because what you're saying is, yes, I was deadly afraid of snakes, but probably too because of your kids. You know, you got to support them in what they're doing. That's another thing that can kind of help you get there. Then you just you leaned into the thing that you feared the most.
So there's categories of fears too. So you have to keep that in mind. So leaning into a fear of driving on the freeway when you really need to drive on the freeway to get to work would be important, and learning how to be able to do that. Sometimes people come to me because they're afraid of flying. And I'm like, well, do you have to fly for work? Well, no, I don't really have to fly anywhere. And I'm like, well, there's no reason for us to treat your fear of flying if you're never even going to need to be on an airplane, but maybe once or twice in your lifetime. And honestly, at that point, ask your doctor for a little medication. You know, why spend hundreds of dollars going through therapy to not be afraid of flying? But the other level of fear is that comes from trauma. That comes from danger. You don't lean into that. That's your body saying, this is not okay. Pay attention to this gut level sense that you're not safe. And so, no, you don't lean into that. You don't put kids in the same room as their perpetrators so they can get used to them. That's just no. Yeah, that's a level of safety that you don't mess with.
What do you do? I mean, what is the cognitive behavioral therapy like? So say I have had a perpetrator. Now, what do I do to eliminate that fear? If I come to you for treatment, what's the first thing that happens? Do you talk about it? How do I overcome that? First of all, yes, you do stay away from anything that's harming you.
It's establishing safety. And so we talk about all the areas in which they feel unsafe and how to establish safety. And then we also remind ourselves that we are safe, okay? So someone may say, well, I can go to this grocery store, I know what's his face won't be there, okay? But when I still walk into the grocery store, I worry that he's there, you know? And so working on that thought.
But not just him, but that someone else, a memory, it could trigger that.
It can, and then you have to learn how to establish that safety. That when this trigger happens and the anxiety comes up and the gut feeling and everything, is what skill can I use to help bring me back to the safety level? That I'm okay and nothing is going to happen to me. And if somebody tries to do something to me, there are multiple people around and resources that I can call on. So you've got to be able to establish that safety. And we do all of that in CBT as well.
So you help us to establish trust again in an area where trust has been broken, even if it's trust for ourselves.
Right.
Safety, you help us to a lot of us walk around with these fears and we don't even realize that safety is the issue. We don't even realize that that's what it is. When we have been experienced not being accepted, low self-esteem, all of these things, we don't realize that just simple belonging and connection is really what the issue is. We really never get to the core of what's really going on with us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's one of our basic human needs, is to be safe and to be connected, to feel loved, to feel appreciated, to feel connected in some way. And then the other basic need is to contribute in some way, to have a purpose, to be moving in some direction. And so when those needs aren't met, we struggle.
When you talk about safety and trauma, I was listening to Andrew Yang's wife. I'm not sure if you saw her interview. She was actually her gynecologist sexually abused her when she was 7 months pregnant. And it was interesting because she said, "You think I would have run out of that office yelling and screaming?" She said, "But I froze. And I didn't talk about it for months to anyone."
Shame.
But I could, even though I've never been sexually abused, I could relate in a way that I know when I've been in situations like when my child was an infant and I thought he was choking, I froze. I couldn't help my child. So, his safety is like, here I am, this mother, but I froze. So I get it. Why people just kind of freeze and they're not clear.
Yeah.
They're not clear. Is that?
Yeah, so the brain reacts. It's a very physiological reaction, just like deer in the headlights, that we will freeze up in a situation that we don't know how to navigate.
Right.
It's too overpowering for us.
Right.
And your what's firing off in the brain, that high level stress, is firing off so great that you're not able to process through the thought, through the emotions, and your executive functioning isn't working. And so there's even another experience that people have, especially in situations like that, and it's been labeled as fawn.
I just read about.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, it's just when those people are so overpowered and they're in such stress that they just go along with the situation because they have they don't have any other idea of what to do. So,
and these are I consider myself a very strong person. It's very strange.
Yeah. So in thinking about sexual abuse or sexual trauma, I see a lot of this with high school girls, where
women. I'm sure this happens to women. Like
women in general, right? They get overpowered by a perpetrator, whether it's someone they know or they don't know, and they just do what the person tells them to do. And sadly, on camera, if someone was actually videotaping that, it would look as if they were complacent and compliant and wanting to cooperate. But what's happening inside of them is that overwhelming stress, and they don't know what else to do. And so they're so frozen that they're just following through and doing exactly what the person is telling them to do, because they're afraid to act out, or they're just so frozen in their trauma of what's happening in that moment. And, perpetrators know that.
Yeah, they do.
And it's always a gamble for some who are just attacking women they don't know, but when they know the victim, they capitalize on that side of them.
It's the same thing. It's you posted an article about the new fight, flight, or freeze, and then he said, "But what about the one called fawn?" And I read that article, and it was a very good one. And he was talking about how a person can know that someone is abusing them, but they still find safety. It could be the only safety they've ever experienced. It could be the only connection that they have, and they fear not having that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We find home in what we trust and what we believe and what we deeply know, even if what we believe is wrong. We can go through our whole lives believing something, and at some point you find out it was never true. It still was a part of your belief. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so when I was reading the article, I was thinking about how much we trust our medical professionals, our career professionals, whomever, when stuff like that happens, what's the first thing you want to say? I want to lose my job. You know, that's the only doctor in my PPO or in my plan, or I've known him forever. He's always been in the family. All of these kinds of things, and they can cause you to make a bad decision to stay and even play a role in, you know, allowing this person to carry these things out wrongfully with you. Does that mean that that's not consensual? That's something else. That's manipulation.
Right. Absolutely.
In full form. You know, that's a form of manipulation.
Right. It is. It is. And sadly, women who get into that situation form the idea that they were part of it.
Yeah.
And that they asked for it or wanted it or something because I wasn't doing anything to push it away or to stop it. There must have been a part of me that needed it or wanted it, and that is a very wrong assumption.
And then nobody's gonna believe me. Everybody's gonna say that I'm lying. People are gonna hate me. I was told once in a situation like that, where I did step up, and I have a different, when stuff happens around me, I just react. Now, sometimes I won't say anything, but I just go all in. I'm different. Everybody's different. But the person pretty much said, nobody's ever going to believe you, you know, because they didn't believe the last time. But I wanted to prove that was not true, and I did. But you're right. When it happens, what do you do? It's like deer in headlights, right in the moment. She described that after she had finished her physical, that he mutilated her body. You know, he was not doing another physical with her. You know what I'm saying? He was violating her, and she talked about it. But she said that other women had actually come out long before her, and there were lawsuits against him.
It should never happened to her.
Correct.
Because there were prior lawsuits against him, and she should have never been alone in that room with him ever.
Yeah.
And they were alone, and there's several who have come out since she's aired this. So the good thing is she is using this platform to really talk about this and helping other people.
In both cases, I had OBGYNs who were males, and not one time was I ever in the room with them, and my nurse wasn't in the room with them. Whenever he was ready to do the exam, he would hit a button and say, "Nurse," and she was right there. If you are, and this is just one situation or one scenario that we're speaking about, that's something that we can request. You know what I'm saying? My OBGYN in both cases, I have 2 kids, were my friends. So I think the biggest obstacle for me initially was to get over was I did business with these people every day. And then I got an OBGYN. But they didn't think it was truly medical for them. And one of them is still my client. I still do public relations for him. He's marrying my son this year. Tears. Excited about that. But it never, you know, we would talk about business while we were doing the exam. And it was just,
well, he was doing his business.
He was. But it was amazing how you can turn that off and turn that on. So you gotta have, as a doctor, you gotta have your mind really on the medical perspective of what you're trying to do. These people who were doing these kind of things, they were manipulative to get into something like that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But situations like this can require CBT. Am I right? After you go through a situation like that, reset a new level of trust.
Right, of trust and safety, and also getting past the shame. So shame is triggered by thoughts about ourselves that we're not worthy any longer, and that other people will think that there's something wrong with us. And in regards to sexual abuse, a lady out in California really made the whole idea popular about 40 years ago with you feel dirty, you feel depressed, and you feel damaged when you've been sexually violated. And working through the thoughts that lead to that instead of to help women understand, or men honestly, to understand that they're not dirty and they're not damaged, and to help them get past the thoughts that lead to the depression.
And that's what CBT can help them
Absolutely.
to do. It's helping you to reestablish trust. It's helping you to reestablish new belief, new values.
And a new relationship with yourself, or a new relationship with other people if you're in a relationship with someone.
So something dies in you when something like that, a violation happens. Am I right?
Does it die or does it get suppressed?
Well, you can't access it.
Well, I don't know.
It
I
could
mean, a
feel
lot
like
of people,
death.
a lot of people feel like their innocence dies, or something
was
like that.
taken.
Something was taken. The dignity is stripped away. So I don't want to diminish or discount anything, but there's a part of me that thinks that it doesn't die, that it just gets tucked away.
That's true.
Because there's just part of this that no matter what you do to me, this part is not going to go away. And for some women, it takes a while for them to access that and realize that we have a spiritual, mystical soul side of ourselves that no one can take away, that no one can damage. But I think it's instinctual going through severe trauma that we shove that away somewhere. We don't cognitively, consciously think about it. We just shove it away and protect it. And for some people, it's a lifetime pulling that back out again.
That's true. But so much of your essence is lodged in that you have protected or have lost control of, or lost positive use of. And when we come back in our part 2 about CBT, Gwen is going to talk to us a little bit more about maybe the essence of that thing, that truth of us that gets lost. And then maybe we can go through some of the benefits of CBT. I have a few things that I'd like to chat with you about that we can do ourselves to help on our path, like brainstorming and journaling and other kind of little therapeutic meditation and these kinds of things.
And I want to talk to her about how CBT can help with eating disorders.
Yeah.
Because I my whole life struggled with food and eating disorders, so I want you to talk to us about that too.
Okay, I'll do my best.
You're in the Brush Lounge. I am Monique Walker.
And Evie Barron Hernandez.
And our guest today is Gwen Brehm, which Gwen is going to start introducing herself because she's going to become a part of this family. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for watching this segment. Part 2 is coming right up.